80 kills in a wooden wire kite against 40 in an all-metal twin-boom beast. Yet one of these two aces never lost a wingman, and the other died at 25. So before you pick a favorite, ask yourself, if Manfred von Richthofen and Richard Bong met in the same sky, who would come home for dinner? It's a question that's haunted aviation enthusiasts and military historians for decades. A clash of titans across the chasm of time and technology. Today we're throwing the Red Baron and America's ace of aces into the same arena, not to fanboy over paint jobs, or to argue about which propeller spun faster. No, we're here to peel back the layers of legend and find out who was the deadliest pilot when everything, technology, tactics, terrain, and the sheer brutal reality of war, was stacked against them. We're not talking hypotheticals about time machines or impossible scenarios. We're talking cold numbers, hot guns, and the nerves of two kids who against all odds turned propellers into legends. We'll explore their worlds, their machines, their methods, and ultimately, their legacies to understand what truly made them masters of the sky. The Red Baron, Knight of the Air. Imagine a world where warfare was still defined by cavalry charges and trenches, a brutal, muddy stalemate stretching across Europe. That's the world Manfred von Richthofen, a Prussian aristocrat born into a military family, first entered in 1915. His initial posting was as a cavalry scout on the Eastern Front. He was a natural horseman, skilled with a saber, but the machine gun and barbed wire quickly rendered his beloved horses obsolete. The static, grinding horror of trench warfare offered little glory for a man of his adventurous spirit. He felt restless, bored, and yearned for something more dynamic, something that offered a chance for individual prowess. Then came the airplane. Initially, these flimsy contraptions of wood, canvas, and piano wire were primarily for observation, eyes in the sky directing artillery. But Richthofen, witnessing the burgeoning aerial skirmishes, saw their potential for something far greater. He swapped his stirrups for a stick, and though his initial flight training was less than stellar, he reportedly crashed on his first solo flight and was even deemed unfit for flying by one instructor. He possessed an iron will and an innate spatial awareness that would soon redefine aerial combat. He never looked back, trading the mud and horses for the boundless, terrifying freedom of the sky. By the spring of 1917, Richthofen had achieved significant success, but he wanted more. He wanted to be unmistakable. He painted his Albatros D3 a striking blood red. It wasn't just a flamboyant gesture. It was a deliberate psychological weapon. As he famously put it, "In the crowd you can't miss me, and I don't want the enemy to miss me either." This bold move turned him into a living legend, a crimson specter in the skies, inspiring dread in his enemies and awe in his countrymen. This wasn't merely a pilot. This was the Red Baron, a knight in shining, or rather blood-red armor. His Albatros D3 and later the iconic Fokker Dr. I triplane became extensions of his will, fast, agile, and deadly. The choice of red was a calculated risk, making him a prime target, but it also cemented his status as the most feared pilot of the Great War. His leadership qualities quickly became apparent. By June 1917, he was given command of Jagdgeschwader 1, an elite unit composed of Germany's top aces. This squadron, with its brightly painted aircraft, often moved by rail from one section of the front to another, much like a traveling show, earning it the enduring nickname, the Flying Circus. They were a formidable force, and under Richthofen's rigorous command they shredded anything that dared to challenge them in the air. The circus was a mobile, highly effective killing machine, a testament to Richthofen's organizational genius and his ability to inspire loyalty and discipline among his fellow pilots. Richthofen's tactics were brutally simple, devoid of the theatrical flourishes some other aces favored. He wasn't interested in aerial ballet. He was interested in kills. His mantra was efficiency and lethality. His preferred method, dive from out of the sun, using the blinding glare to conceal his approach with the sun at his back. He'd close to an almost suicidal 50 yards, ensuring every bullet counted, fire a short, precise burst into the enemy's engine or cockpit, then zoom away, using his plane's speed and his own momentum to regain altitude for another attack or to disengage. There were no Hollywood spirals, no barnstorming aerobatics designed to impress. It was pure economy of motion, surgical precision and marksmanship that logged an astonishing 80 confirmed kills. For context, the average dogfight in 1917 lasted a chaotic 90 seconds. Richthoven's engagements, often decisive and swift, lasted a mere 40. He was a predator, studying his victims first, often circling above them like a hawk until their guard dropped, until they forgot he was there. And then, with terrifying speed, he pounced. He wasn't just a pilot. He was a hunter. Yet despite his individual prowess and the iconic image of the lone red plane, the Baron wasn't a lone wolf in his philosophy. He was a firm believer in teamwork and disciplined formation flying, a revolutionary concept in an era that often glorified individual aerial duels. He kept his pilots disciplined, first flying in pairs, then in fours, always preaching that survival depended on mutual cover. Always attack in numbers, he insisted. Never fly alone. He understood that even the most skilled pilot was vulnerable without support. In an era when parachutes were considered cowardly, a sign of surrender rather than survival, he demanded every pilot return with a story of the engagement, a detailed map marking the enemy's position and, most importantly, their lives. His men trusted him implicitly because he bled with them, literally. On July 6, 1917, during a fierce engagement, he took a bullet to the head, blacked out momentarily, and still managed to regain consciousness and land his damaged albatross in a beet field behind German lines. 2 months later, defying doctors' orders and still suffering from dizzy spells and severe headaches, he was back in the cockpit. The German High Command, desperate for a morale booster and a symbol of unwavering defiance, needed their Red Baron back in the sky. That symbol, however, became an even greater target. Every Allied pilot in France, from the greenest rookie to the most seasoned ace, dreamed of shooting down the red plane. The bounty on his head, both official and unofficial, was immense. Richthoven knew this. The pressure was unrelenting. He constantly moved his flying circus, establishing new airstrips every dawn, seeing new anxious faces in the mess tent every night, as replacements arrived for those who didn't return. The strain of constant combat, the burden of command, and the lingering effects of his head injury aged him prematurely. Photographs from early 1918 show a stark contrast to his earlier, more youthful images. Hollow cheeks, eyes that never seemed to smile, a man carrying the weight of an entire nation's hopes and fears on his shoulders. The boyish enthusiasm was gone, replaced by a grim determination. Then came April 21, 1918. He was chasing a young, inexperienced Canadian pilot, Wilfred May, flying a Sopwith Camel, too low over the Somme battlefield, deep behind Allied lines. In his relentless pursuit, Richthoven held the dive a second too long, becoming vulnerable. A single .303 round tore through his chest. The kill was famously credited to Canadian pilot Roy Brown, who had dived to May's aid, but forensic evidence and historical analysis strongly suggest that Australian ground gunners, firing from anti-aircraft positions, delivered the fatal burst. His Fokker Doctor I landed intact in a field, engine still ticking, a silent testament to his control even in his final moments. He died seconds later, his last word reportedly kaput. 80 confirmed kills, 19 months of relentless combat, one fatal mistake in judgment. He was just 25 years old. His death was a devastating blow to German morale and a massive boost to the Allies, marking the end of an era in aerial combat. Richard Bong, ace of aces, fast forward 25 years and 7,000 miles west, to a world engulfed in another, even more devastating global conflict. The flimsy biplanes and triplanes of WWI had given way to sleek, powerful monoplanes, capable of speeds and altitudes unimaginable to Richthoven's generation. Here, a farm boy from Poplar, Wisconsin, who once plowed fields behind a tractor, now twisted the twin throttles of a Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Richard Bong was a different kind of ace, hailing from a different time, a different culture, and flying a vastly different machine. He didn't look for fame, he looked for angles, for the perfect position to deliver a kill. Where other pilots, perhaps accustomed to single-engine fighters, saw a clumsy, twin-boom heavy fighter, Bong saw raw power and potential. The P-38, with its distinctive twin tail booms and central nacelle, was a marvel of engineering for its time. It boasted two powerful Allison engines that could outrun a Japanese Zero in a straight line, and a concentrated armament of 450 caliber machine guns plus a potent 20mm cannon, all mounted in the nose. This formidable firepower could shred a Japanese Betty bomber in a mere 4 seconds, turning it into a flaming wreck. Bong intuitively understood his machine's strengths, speed, altitude, and devastating firepower. He wasn't interested in turning circles with agile Zeros. He preferred to leverage the Lightning's boom and zoom capability. Hitting hard and fast, he arrived in the sweltering, unforgiving Pacific Theater in late 1942, assigned to Guadalcanal's 9th Fighter Squadron. The early days of the Pacific War were brutal, characterized by fierce, often desperate fighting against a highly skilled and fanatical enemy. On his very first combat patrol, a moment that perfectly encapsulated his aggressive style, he nearly collided with an enemy seaplane. Without hesitation, he yanked the powerful Lightning into a chandelle, a steep climbing turn, and bagged the kill at a terrifying 25 yards. So close, in fact, that the prop wash from the enemy plane slammed his canopy, momentarily disorienting him. That set the tone for his entire career, close, personal, decisive. Unlike the relatively confined dogfights of Europe, Pacific combat often happened in vast vertical columns, amidst towering cumulus clouds and the blinding glare of the rising sun. Bong quickly learned to adapt, using the P-38's superior climb rate to spiral climb above the fray, pick out a trailing Zero, and dive with a calculated 30-degree offset, making it incredibly difficult for the Japanese rear gunner to track him. He was a master of surprise and overwhelming force. By the spring of 1944, Bong had accumulated 20 kills and developed a reputation that bordered on mythical. He was known for his almost solitary hunting style, often taking off at dawn, flying hundreds of miles across vast stretches of ocean to places like Rabaul, a heavily fortified Japanese base. He'd orbit patiently above the harbor, a silent, deadly sentinel, waiting for a Japanese Zero to lift off heavy with fuel and ammunition, its pilot perhaps still groggy from sleep. Then with a single short burst from his nose-mounted guns, he'd ignite it, sending it flaming into the sea. He logged more hours above enemy territory than almost any other American pilot, often returning with his Lightning riddled with bullet holes through the tail booms, hydraulic fluid dripping like honey from damaged lines, yet always bringing his plane and himself home. Despite his aggressive, often solitary hunting, Bong harbored a deep sense of responsibility for his wingmen. Unlike many aces who would charge into a fight, leaving their less experienced wingmen to fend for themselves, Bong's rule was simple, direct, and non-negotiable. If you can't see me, you're too far away. He insisted on tight formations and mutual support, ensuring that while he was often the one to deliver the killing blow, his comrades were always covered. He was a leader not through formal command, but through his unwavering example and his commitment to his fellow pilots. His humble, unassuming nature belied his ferocity in the cockpit. He was a quiet, almost shy man on the ground, but a relentless predator in the air. He famously adorned the nose of his P-38 with a picture of his sweetheart Marge, a touch of normalcy amidst the chaos of war. His 40th and final kill came over Luzon on December 17, 1944. A formation of Japanese Nakajima fighters attempted to bounce a squadron of B-24 Liberators, a desperate attempt to break through the American bomber screen. Bong, ever vigilant, rolled his Lightning inverted, executed a breathtaking split-S maneuver through the bomber box, and in a whirlwind of fire and smoke flamed 3 enemy planes in a blistering 90 seconds. The gunners on the Liberators, witnessing this aerial masterclass, cheered wildly over the radio as he flashed past, his canopy open, waving like a kid on a bicycle. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph, a display of skill and daring that cemented his legend. The Army Air Forces, recognizing the immense propaganda value of their ace of aces, immediately grounded him. 40 was the magic number, the threshold for a hero's return home for parades and war bond tours. He married his high school sweetheart Marge, accepted the Congressional Medal of Honor from General Douglas MacArthur himself, and spent 1945 crisscrossing the country, selling war bonds, a reluctant but effective symbol of American heroism. But Bong, like many combat pilots, missed the sky, the challenge, the sheer exhilaration of flight. The quiet life of a celebrity didn't suit him. In August 1945, with the war in the Pacific drawing to a close, He signed on as a test pilot for Lockheed, tasked with putting their revolutionary new jet, the P-80 Shooting Star, through its paces. These early jets were cutting-edge technology, pushing the boundaries of aviation and inherently dangerous. On the sixth flight, a turbine blade disintegrated at 100% RPM. The engine flamed out, the canopy jammed, trapping him inside, and Bong ejected too low for his parachute to fully deploy. He was 32 days past his 25th birthday, 40 kills, 2.5 years of intense combat, and then one fatal test flight. A tragic irony for a man who had faced down death countless times in battle. Head-to-head now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The hard numbers and the even harder truths. On the surface, 80 versus 40 feels like a knockout, a clear victory for the Red Baron. But that's a superficial comparison, ignoring the immense gulf in technology, tactics, and the very nature of warfare between their respective eras. You see, Richthofen flew against fabric-covered observation planes and early fighters, often lumbering along at a stately 80 mph. His targets were relatively slow, fragile, and often poorly armed. Bong, on the other hand, faced highly maneuverable Japanese Zeros and determined kamikaze pilots, flying at speeds exceeding 300 mph, often in complex, multi-layered engagements. The Baron's average target typically took 1 or 2 well-placed bullets to bring down. Bong's targets, particularly the more robust Japanese fighters and bombers, usually absorbed a 5-second burst of mixed 50 caliber and 20 mm cannon fire before succumbing. This isn't to diminish Richthofen's achievements, but to contextualize them. His kills were harder to come by in terms of the sheer number of enemy aircraft available, but perhaps easier in terms of the fragility of the targets. The technology gap between their aircraft was simply staggering, a chasm spanning a quarter-century of rapid aerospace innovation. Richthofen's iconic Fokker triplane, a symbol of WWI aerial combat, was armed with 1 or sometimes 2 synchronized Spandau machine guns, firing through the propeller arc. It was agile, capable of turning on a dime, a true dogfighter, but it was also fragile, often struggling above 12,000 feet, and relatively slow. Bong's P-38 Lightning, a behemoth by comparison, packed a formidable punch. 1 Hispano 20 mm cannon and 4 heavy 50 caliber machine guns, all clustered in the nose for maximum impact and accuracy. His aircraft could climb to a dizzying 35,000 feet and cruise at over 350 mph, offering vastly superior speed, altitude, and range. However, this power came with its own set of demands. The P-38 needed 2,500 horsepower on each side, a total of 3,000 horsepower, just to stay airborne, a testament to its size and complexity. The difference isn't just in raw numbers. It's in the entire paradigm of aerial warfare. Richthofen was fighting essentially glorified kites. Bong was flying a weapon system. Their tactical philosophies were as divergent as their aircraft. Richthofen, despite his individual fame, preached disciplined formation flying, mutual cover, and surprise. He was an architect of air combat doctrine, emphasizing the collective strength of the squadron. He led men into battle, organizing their attacks, ensuring their safety. His approach was systematic, almost scientific for its time. Bong, conversely, often preferred solitary stalking, relying on radio silence, his exceptional eyesight, and the P-38's altitude advantage to surprise his prey. He was an opportunist, disappearing into the clouds and reappearing moments later with a burning enemy plane in his wake. While he cared deeply for his wingmen, his personal combat style was often a testament to individual initiative and a profound understanding of his aircraft's unique capabilities. One built a team, the other mastered a machine. And what about survivability? The Red Baron flew an astonishing 1,680 combat sorties over 19 months, a relentless pace that speaks to the sheer intensity of the Western Front. He was hit 5 times before the fatal round, a testament to both his luck and the inherent vulnerability of early aircraft. Each flight was a roll of the dice. Bong, on the other hand, flew approximately 200 combat sorties over 2.5 years, a significantly lower number, though often over far greater distances and against a more modern, faster enemy. Crucially, he never took a bullet in the cockpit, a remarkable feat of skill, situational awareness, and perhaps a touch of extraordinary luck. Yet the cruel irony of fate intervened for both. Richthofen died chasing a target too low, a momentary lapse in judgment in the heat of battle. Bong died testing the next generation of aviation, pushing the boundaries of flight itself, a hero cut down not by an enemy, but by the very technology he sought to master. Let's talk kill density. Richthofen, operating in the highly contested airspace of the Western Front, where enemy aircraft were plentiful and targets often presented themselves readily, averaged an incredible 4.2 kills per month. It was a target-rich environment. Bong, operating in the vast, sprawling Pacific Theater, where distances were immense and enemy aircraft, while formidable, were often more spread out, averaged 1.3 kills per month. This difference isn't necessarily a measure of skill, but of opportunity. Many historians argue, with considerable justification, that if Bong had flown over the crowded skies of France in 1917, with its constant aerial activity, he might very well have matched, or even surpassed, the Baron's tally. Conversely, if Richthofen, with his slower, less robust aircraft, had faced the fast, heavily armed fighters and tenacious pilots of 1944 Japan, his score would likely have stalled in the teens, overwhelmed by the sheer technological disparity and the different nature of the air war. The context, as always, is everything. The verdict: so, who was the deadliest pilot? The answer, as you might suspect, isn't as simple as checking a scorecard. Deadliest is not a spreadsheet calculation. It's a deeply nuanced question, steeped in context, innovation, and impact. Manfred von Richthofen turned aerial combat into a science at a time when planes were made of canvas, wood, and a whole lot of hope. He didn't just fly, he innovated. He conceived and implemented squadron tactics, the importance of formation flying, mutual support, the coordinated attack that every Air Force still teaches in some form to this very day. He was a pioneer, a strategist who saw beyond the individual duel to the larger picture of air superiority. His influence on the development of fighter tactics is undeniable and enduring. He set the standard for what an ace could be, transforming the image of the aviator from a mere daring adventurer to a skilled, disciplined warrior. Richard Bong, on the other hand, mastered technology that hadn't even existed 5 years earlier. He took a complex, powerful machine like the P-38 Lightning and used it like a scalpel, or perhaps more accurately, a sledgehammer, against an enemy who fought with unwavering tenacity and often refused to surrender. He adapted his tactics to the unique demands of the Pacific Theater, leveraging his aircraft's strengths to devastating effect. Bong proved that individual skill combined with advanced technology could still turn the tide of battle, even in the era of large-scale air forces and complex air campaigns. He exemplified the modern ace, a pilot who could exploit every advantage his machine offered. If you measure by sheer numbers, by the undeniable influence on early air combat doctrine, and by transforming the very concept of aerial warfare, the Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, unquestionably edges ahead. His legacy is etched into the foundations of military aviation. If, however, you measure by lethality per engagement against vastly superior and more resilient targets, by adaptability across generations of aircraft technology, and by a remarkable ability to survive despite constant exposure to extreme danger, then Richard Bong takes the crown. He was a force of nature in the cockpit, a testament to the power of a skilled pilot leveraging cutting-edge technology. So the honest, most accurate answer is not a simple either-or. It's a recognition of two extraordinary individuals, each the deadliest pilot of his specific war, in his specific context. Both possessed an almost supernatural skill, an innate understanding of aerial combat, and an unflinching courage that few could ever match. And both, without a shadow of a doubt, would have been terrifying adversaries in the other's cockpit, adapting and excelling regardless of the era or the machine. They represent the pinnacle of fighter pilot achievement, separated by time but united by their mastery of the skies. If you've already picked a side, if you're convinced one of these legends reigns supreme, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Just keep it civil, folks, or I swear I'll send a Fokker triplane after you at dawn. And if you're hungry for more ace stories, if the roar of engines and the smell of aviation fuel gets your blood pumping, then hit that subscribe button. We've got more legends lined up. From the Black Devil Eric Hartmann to the legendary Japanese ace Saburo Sakai, ready to take you on another journey through the annals of air combat history. Don't miss it. Legacy. The stories of Richthofen and Bong transcend their individual kill counts. They are woven into the very fabric of aviation history and popular culture. Richthofen's distinctive red paint scheme still adorns countless replicas at air shows around the globe, a vivid, enduring symbol of early aerial combat. His autobiography, Der rote Kampfflieger, the Red Fighter Pilot, remains not just a historical document, but practically required reading at every major flight school, offering insights into the mindset and tactics of a true pioneer. His name is synonymous with the daring and romance of World War I flying. Similarly, Bong's P-38, Marge, named of course, after his beloved wife, hangs proudly restored in the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, its twin engines polished like silver, a gleaming testament to American ingenuity and heroism in World War II. Streets in both Germany and Bong's home state of Wisconsin carry their names, ensuring their memory lives on in the communities they hailed from. And perhaps most tellingly, kids who can't yet spell triplane or lightning still build model kits of both aircraft, imagining themselves at the controls, locked in aerial combat. Their legends continue to inspire generations, sparking an interest in history, aviation, and heroism. More importantly, beyond the models and the museums, these two men profoundly shaped how we think about air power itself. They solidified the idea that a single, determined, and exceptionally skilled pilot could, through sheer force of will and mastery of their craft, alter the morale of entire armies, influence strategic outcomes, and even become a national symbol. The Red Baron proved it in an age of trenches, gas attacks, and the brutal grind of static warfare, demonstrating that the skies offered a new dimension of combat and heroism. Bong proved it again a generation later amidst the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific among coral islands and carrier decks, showing that even with advanced technology, the human element remained paramount. Their stories remind us that while courage is timeless, a universal quality that transcends generations and technologies, luck is most certainly not. Both men faced unimaginable odds, risked their lives daily, and pushed the boundaries of what was thought possible in the air. Their achievements were products of immense skill, relentless practice, and an unshakable resolve. But in the end, fate, in its cruel and arbitrary way, played its hand differently for each. They faced different kinds of death, one in the heat of battle, the other in the pursuit of progress, but both left an indelible mark on history. So, the next time you board a sleek modern jet, buckling into your seat, and the captain's voice comes over the intercom, casually announcing flight time 2 hours to your destination, take a moment. Remember the legends. Remember that once upon a time that same journey, even if it were possible, would have taken 8 agonizing hours in an open cockpit, with a thin scarf for heat, a prayer for armor, and the constant, chilling threat of enemy fire. We stand on the shoulders of giants like Richthofen and Bong, men who dared to dream of flying and then dared to master it, transforming the world in the process. If you learned something new today, if this journey through history sparked a flicker of wonder, then please give the video a thumbs up, share it with the history nerd in your squadron, and I'll see you in the next dogfight.